Although there's an awful lot more in it, today's gospel story is often referred to as Doubting Thomas, which is a rather ungenerous attitude that's attached to Thomas. Thomas hadn't been there, we heard, when Jesus made an appearance to the disciples. Despite them sharing what they'd seen, Thomas wasn't prepared to accept it. Like many of his fellow disciples who were also slow to accept the resurrection and doubted the testimony of the women, Thomas believed that evidence needed to be tested and the testimony of witnesses had to be verified. He said, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my fingers where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." So when Jesus does appear to Thomas and he is able to verify those witnesses, Thomas makes one of the most fulsome professions of faith found in the Gospels that we've just heard. He said, "My Lord and my God." And then Jesus told him, "Because you've seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." As people who celebrated the resurrection of Jesus last Sunday with great joy and celebration, is it that we really believe and live out? Are we living our lives as Easter people? A huge amount has been written about the proof of the resurrection in academic terms. But for many, that's not what will inspire faith. The greatest proof of Jesus' resurrection is not what we say about it, but how we look as a result of it. I found a quote that said, "The purpose of Jesus' resurrection is to awaken the faith that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God." In other words, the fact of Jesus' resurrection inspires animated faith. What we forget often is the only gospel that some people will ever hear or see is the gospel according to you or me. Do you look and sound and live as people who know that the resurrection is true and live out your faith that way? Are we a church that lives out its resurrection faith with generosity and inclusion? The reading that Deborah read to us from Acts is the church, people of the church community at the time of Jesus. And they're talking to people who, helping those in need was a fundamental part of Judaism at the time of Jesus. There was no benefit system or pension or at all. But giving could be done, and sadly often was, in a way that focused more on the generosity of the giver, as Jesus pointed out several times. In Acts, we see what marked out that early Christian community was a generous lifestyle. They encouraged one another, they shared with one another, they prayed together, learnt together, and supported those in need. Of course, they weren't perfect, but they realized that they were meant to be a community that was open to others. When I was on sabbatical, we went a number of times to the Living Room Cinema that had opened in Chipping Norton. Two screens, only 32 seats that are very comfortable indeed, and you can take in your glass of wine and have your nachos and relax and enjoy. There was a film that I had seen advertised early on in the sabbatical, and when it was then shown in Chippy, I booked for Paul and I to go. And I want to share the story of that film with you. It's called The Old Oak, And it's a Ken Loach film set in the Northeast, so brings a lot for me from that. It was filmed in parts of the East Durham area where Billy Elliot was also filmed, so Easington and Morton, and where life is very, very depressed. And the main character was the pub landlord, who's called T.J. Ballantyne. And he was a bit of a Job-like person. He'd been divorced and was depressed. He had a grown-up son who didn't speak to him. And the Old Oak is the name of his pub. It was the one community meeting place in this former mining town and in dire need of refurbishment. His regulars would sit in the pub, raging, livid about the collapse of house prices and brooding over YouTube videos about immigrants. One day, a busload of terrified Syrian refugees arrived in that village, and the tensions worsened. TJ became friends with that group of people. He was defending them when the locals were absolutely reeling against them being around. And in the back of the pub was a room that hadn't been open for quite some time. The local people wanted him to open it up, but he refused. But then, as he became friendly with Yara, who was a young Syrian woman who'd been housed in the village with her brother and her elderly mother, he decided to open up the room as a place for almost like a food bank style community supper, both for locals and for the Syrians, so that they could get to know each other. There was one scene that actually moved me to tears because TJ and Yara were sitting in Durham Cathedral. They'd gone to collect food that had been donated to the refugees. And Yara was deeply affected by listening to the choir and the awe of the just amazing building. You can tell that Durham Cathedral means a huge, huge amount to me. Their friendship opened up all sorts of possibilities for the divided village, where there was fear, loss, and a difficulty of finding hope. And there's one scene in the film that really stuck out, was when Yara had a camera and loved taking photographs. And TJ took her into that back room where there were lots and lots of photographs of the community, so the mining community and people who had lived there. And there was a sign in that room that said, "Eat together, stick together." And for me, perhaps it wasn't the intention of Ken Loach, but for me, that was Easter faith being lived out and bringing hope. People able to come together, to eat together, to know each other, and to go out and to share that hope with each other. We need to be Easter people in our community, living out the faith that we have, which may have doubts sometimes, but also has the strength of Thomas to be able to say, "My Lord and my God." And how do we go about that? We need to get to know one another, to love and care for one another. We need to be more than a filling station here on a Sunday morning, but be a genuine home where strangers are welcomed and members experience a sense of family, even if they live alone. Given that our context here in 21st century Wendover is very different from that described in Acts, how might we foster generosity in our attitudes and behaviour within and beyond our fellowship? I've got some homework for you. you were given a card. And if you weren't, you can grab one as you go out. At the moment at St Mary's, we're looking at our vision. What will our church look like in another 5 years' time? What would you, yes, you sitting there, like to see happen under the umbrella of St Mary's Church, in this building or beyond? What's missing? What's missing from our life? What would you like there to be more of? I'd like you to write it down on your postcard, give it to me as you leave, drop it into the shop, chat with your friends in and out of the church. Many are lonely. What could we do? What could we do to think of the world beyond Wendover? So today, I'm calling us to be people who have Christ at the centre of our lives and live it out as Easter people. Amen. Just one or two notices. We are heading towards APCM, our annual parochial church meeting that will happen on Sunday, the 28th of April. It'll be a joint service. So those of you who've been before know that I'll talk during that service, and then we have as short a possible business meeting afterwards. But at that meeting, we need to be electing some more people to the PCC. We will have 3 vacancies, and looking for new people to come and be part of that, to help to make decisions about how our church is being run. If you read the update, you'll see that Matt Ryan has decided this is time for him to stand down as treasurer, which will leave a big gap. If you know of anybody, I can suggest anybody, please come and have a word with me about that. We're also just revising our electoral roll. Next year is the one where we start all over again. But this year, if you have been coming to St Mary's for 6 months or more and consider St Mary's to be your church and you're not on our electoral roll, then please have a word with me afterwards and I can give you a form, or you can find it online, and do sign up so that we have as full a membership list as we can. And that does include, I'm thinking of people behind the pillar, that if you're 16 or over, then you can be a member of the electoral roll. The homework that I gave you, I really would like you, as people who are worshipping at this service, to be thinking about our vision for St Mary's. The PCC have done a little bit of work. I'm going to be repeating what I've said at the 10:45. And it is for all of us, as people of this place, as part of this community, as people living out our Easter faith, to think about what it is that we feel that our church needs to be doing, to be at the heart of the community, to be perhaps more visible than we very often are at the moment. So do please have a think about that card. As I say, drop it into the shop, get it to me some way or other. And if you're interested in watching The Old Oak and you have Netflix, it is now on Netflix, and it is very well worth watching, or we might find a time when we can show it in church. I think that's... Oh, no. Tomorrow at 2:00 is Ron Smith's funeral. On Thursday, Beryl is being buried alongside her husband at Great Missenden at 2:30. That's for the family. And then at 3:30, there'll be a service of celebration and Thanksgiving here at St Mary's. And then on the 17th, Derek Roxbury's funeral and burial is at 11:00. So if you knew any of those people, then do please come along to those services. Thank you.